Joining me now to discuss all of this is the great panel that we have here. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli, who's been all over this story. Also with us is Atlanta Journal-Constitution Washington correspondent Tia Mitchell, Democratic pollster and NBC News political analyst Cornell Belcher, and Republican strategist and NBC News political analyst Rick Tyler. Thanks to all of you for being here. Mike, I want to start with you. We have been reporting for days on the frustration that President Biden feels and also the frustration among his allies. Did we see a tiny change in strategy today?
It's interesting, Kristen, because we saw the White House do something today, which they hadn't done in, I know it's only been a week, but it feels like a lot longer, a lifetime in politics, which is really punch back for the first time. Yes, we had Karine at the podium with that frustrating and familiar script about what she can't answer. But we did hear from the White House counsel's office, Ian Sams, the spokesperson, both offering a more fulsome explanation for why they can't answer the questions that we've been asking them now for 5 days, but also to point the finger back at the Republicans, to accuse House Republicans who are now launching additional investigations in addition to the ones they were already mobilized for, to say that they didn't say a peep when President Trump had a similar, but in their view also very different situation involving classified documents. And so it's taken a while, but it's very clear that the White House now at least is comfortable engaging in a political fight where the legal fight is one that they're still keeping very hands-off for at the moment.
Cornell, you have your finger on the pulse of this as well. In your conversations with Democrats, what are they saying to you about what the response has been so far? And as Mike is pointing out, they're punching back today. That is not insignificant. Do you think that it's a forceful enough and aggressive enough strategy, though?
Well, you'll see it unfold over the next week or so, right? This is such a classic storm of a story, Washington insider storm of a story, because out in middle America, they're not having this conversation at all. Right, so we're making a storm of a story for political purposes, and I get it, because I'm a political hack. I get the political purpose behind this, but the idea that these are equivalent is just flat out wrong.
They might not be equivalent, but here you have two similar headlines. They're now both under investigation.
And who's creating the headlines? Right, we know they're not at all equivalent. One group took documents, knowingly took documents, defied a subpoena around these documents, wouldn't give these documents back. The other one's like, oh, we have these documents, let's give them back. They weren't asked for these documents. They gave these documents back, and they're trying to. But look, the drip of documents is a problem. I get it, but these stories are not at all equivalent. And I think over the next couple of weeks, you're going to see the White House and allies talk about the differences between the two.
Yeah, I think it's true. They're not the same. But there are people at home that are paying attention, and to them, the root of the issue is the same. President Trump had classified documents that he shouldn't have had. Now they're hearing President Biden also had classified documents in his possession when he was out of office that he shouldn't have had. So for them, it is a headache. No, it's not the number one story that's, keeping them up at night. But for them, they're saying, what is President Biden doing? It's the same thing we were angry at President Trump about just a few months ago. Now it looks like he was doing the same thing. And that's the issue, because that's what people at home are saying.
Well, then isn't it our job? I play media guy. Sometimes I'm a pollster. But then isn't it our job as the media to explain what the differences are? And quite frankly, we have not done a very good job of that.
I think the media has tried to bend over backwards trying to explain the difference.
I have to say, I do think there has been an effort to, and the White House has been very clear, let's make the distinction to give the White House its due when they make that argument. But Rick Tyler, Republicans wasted no time jumping all over this. Do you think that they run the risk of looking hypocritical? Because they did not go after former President Trump's handling of classified documents. And we're talking about, again, hundreds of documents.
Of course they look hypocritical, as Biden looks hypocritical, as I think his quote was, how could this happen? How could someone be so irresponsible, referring to Trump? And then here he is in the same situation. And I do have to disagree. Somebody removed documents that were found in Mr. Biden's possession in his school office and at home where they weren't supposed to be. That is not fundamentally different than what happened with Trump. I'm not defending either one of them. Classified documents should be handled well, but it shouldn't be, well, they're completely different because Mr. Biden had them or Mr. Trump had them. They are, at its root, the same. They were among personal possessions. Trump was, among Burger King wrappers and bubble gum, and Biden was next to his Corvette in the garage.
No, a subpoena makes them different. A subpoena and obstruction of
that's after the fact. But that's after the fact.
Well, but we also
we can compound the crime.
No, well, again, I'm glad you went to crime because when you got a subpoena for something and then you defy that subpoena, then you get then it's obstruction of justice. There's none of that here. So no, I'm not going to allow anyone around this table to sort of put out this equivalency when it's fundamentally wrong.
Tia, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, there is a chance that Republicans overplay their hand here because there are differences. The volume of documents, the perception that President Trump did not cooperate when he was asked to turn over the documents that he had, that is a difference with President Biden. That doesn't negate the fact that at the core, we're still talking about classified documents that neither one of them should have had in their position. But that's where Republicans have to be careful with these investigations and these inquiries.
Mike, and you have some new reporting on
Yeah, we have some new information because one of the key differences as well between the Trump team and the Biden team is just how careful the Biden team is being. You're not seeing, flippant tweets talking about what is being potentially looked at here. And our colleague Ken Delaney is now reporting on an interesting dynamic here because the White House explanation today for why they can't be more transparent is because they see it as interfering in an ongoing Justice Department investigation. Well, Ken Delaney is now reporting, based on a law enforcement source, that there has been no directive from the Justice Department, from the special counsel's office, telling them that they can't answer some of the very basic questions that we at the White House are trying to ask on a daily basis. And so this is, I think, the White House, both by convenience, but by their interpretation of what interference would look like, and the firewall that President Biden has been clear about since before when he was a candidate, that he's going to have independence between the DOJ and the White House. And now DOJ is saying, well, you can say more if you want.
That's not insignificant. I mean, Cornell, hearing that from DOJ, because, by the way, we've been saying to the White House almost on a daily basis, are you not answering these questions because the Justice Department has told you not to answer these questions? I mean, what could the potential impact of that be, particularly as we are talking about the possibility of President Biden announcing he wants to run for re-election sometime soon?
I think if we've watched the last couple of speeches that President Biden has given, especially the one in Ebenezer, I think he's already launched his presidential. I think he's already
that's a fair point.
I think he's already launched it. But look, I think the drip, and we know this. It's the drip, right? But they're caught in a tough place because if they held back and said, well, let's wait till we get all the documents and see if all the documents are there, well, then guess what we'd be doing today? We'd be attacking. Why didn't you put them all out? Why didn't you let us know when you did? So it's really a no-win situation here. I think, again, we're going to have to push back on the being these things being the same. But it's a tough situation that the White House is in.
All right. I want to go to Capitol Hill and Ali Vitale and just get the reaction there to all of these latest developments. And just to underscore what Mike just said, the Justice Department now coming out and saying, look, they haven't told the White House that they can't answer some of these very basic questions. Ali, you've been tracking the strategy in Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill. What are they telling you at this hour? Where does this controversy stand?
Look, my question, Kristen, and I did pose this on the call that we did with the White House today with Ian Sams, a spokesperson for the counsel's office, is, okay, I see the way that you guys are dealing with the press questions on this, but what does it mean when it comes time to either go along with the requests that Republican committee heads are already making, or are you going to stonewall on that front? I didn't get a clean answer. There was sort of this comment about we do want to work with Congress when it's done in good faith, but then a lot of work to show that these inquiries are not being made in good faith. I think it's really important that you guys point out that they are now going into a sort of offensive posture on this against the Republicans who are trying to lead the investigations. And I think that's probably the dynamic that we're going to see here over the course of the next few months. This White House, I know that you guys around the table who cover it know this well, they were prepared for this Congress to be one where oversight and investigation were the main focal points, and that they were going to be facing a lot of inquiries from Republicans in Congress. They did not anticipate that this was going to be the first interlude of that and that this was going to be the focus. But nevertheless, they were staffed for this. They were ready for this. You can see it in the ways that they're already attacking the people who are doing the letter writing and the question asking from a committee perspective, going after people like the Oversight Chairman James Comer, Jim Jordan, and others. It's going to be really important because we're going to try to watch them add the context around each of these inquiries time and again. And I do think that the point that Cornell makes is an important one, which is that there are distinctions here, but for Republicans, the more that they can muddy the waters and equate these two instances of document having, the better for them. I think the catch, and you guys have alluded to this too around the table, is that when Republicans go at Biden for having these documents and being lax with where he kept them, they inevitably will have to engage on the Trump of it all, the fact that he did that. And of course, we also don't know the intent behind this yet either. That's going to be one of the really important questions. What did Biden know about these documents versus we know that former President Trump has gone so far as to say, well, I declassified these documents, which does sort of imply that he knew they were there in the first instance. So that's one of the key questions, too, that we're going to have to watch as we get more information on this, hopefully.
Yeah, great perspective from Capitol Hill. Ali Vitale, thank you. And Ali mentioned James Comer. I want to play a little bit of what he had to say and just get everyone's reaction on the other side. Take a listen.
With respect to investigating President Trump, there have been so many investigations of President Trump. I don't feel like we need to spend a whole lot of time investigating President Trump because the Democrats have done that for the past 6 years. So no one's been investigated more than Donald Trump. Who hasn't been investigated is Joe Biden. And that's why we're finally launching an investigation of Joe Biden. The House Oversight Committee, one investigation, and I hope to have it wrapped up as soon as possible.
Rick, what do you make of that answer that we heard from Comer? Does it muddy the waters?
I don't know. I think it's worrisome. I think most people, as we started this conversation with, is that this is not on the top of people's agenda. And people worry that what is Congress going to do about very significant issues about inflation, gas prices, jobs, stability in the economy, 401ks, the recent economic outlook, which is very terrible. And instead, we're going to put the Republicans in charge of Congress to investigate a Democratic administration in response to the Democrats had just finished. And I think it's very worrisome, and it's not sustainable.
Well, to your point about wanting to get something done, one of the things that the Treasury Secretary says they have to get done is raise the debt ceiling. Kevin McCarthy was asked about this. The White House has said they're not going to negotiate. This is something we have to get done. Here's what Kevin McCarthy had to say.
We're 6 months away. Why wouldn't we sit down now and change this behavior? That we would put ourselves on a more fiscally strong position. It would make the future generation, make our nation stronger, make the economics and stronger for this country. Let's sit down. He's the president. We're the majority in the House. The Democrats are the majority in the Senate. And let's, exactly the way the founders designed Congress to work, find the compromise and find the common sense compromise that puts us back onto a balanced budget.
Tia, we've covered debt ceiling fights before. Is this moment different? And what do you hear when you listen to the speaker say that?
I mean, what I hear the speaker saying is what I think a lot of Americans believe and think, and, let's get government spending in order. Let's reduce our national debt. Let's bring down the deficit. All those things sound great, but it's easier said than done. So I think what the Democrats and probably even the Republicans in the Senate are saying is, okay, go ahead, Kevin McCarthy, get your Republican majority, get it together, get with your Freedom Caucus members, get with your moderates, and see what you can handle. That is the true test.
Kristen, the White House may not have been prepared for this fight over classified documents that they're engaged in now. They've been ready for this one for some time.
That's a very good
President Biden, in the midterm stump speech that he was delivering out across the country, was attacking Republicans preemptively for wanting to slash Social Security entitlement programs, all of which are going to be potentially on the menu of what Republicans say they want. As casual as Kevin McCarthy looked just a few minutes ago this morning,
very relaxed.
That's, I think, part of the strategy for the White House here, too, which is, A, we're not negotiating at all. They remember what it was like in the Obama administration to try to have this be a negotiating point. But secondly, they don't want to negotiate on their own because they know Kevin McCarthy is going to struggle mightily, to your point, to get 218 votes behind something as an attachment to the debt ceiling increase. And so they feel like they have the political upper hand for now, but this is going to be very real crisis potentially this summer.
It really could be. Cornell, what are you hearing in terms of the level of concern that this time is different, that this time the country could go over the
Well, I mean, look no further than what you hear from Wall Street, right? And you hear what's coming out of Bank of America. Like, there are real concerns that we're going to get to the brink on this and it could collapse our economy, right? So the ideal that we're going to, that Republicans are now going to try to extort things that they want out of our government by this means by which they could not do politically is, I I think it's really problematic. I think this does give the White House an opportunity to go on the defensive, on the offensive with House Republicans in a way that I think is going to be catastrophic, especially as we come closer to this debt ceiling, especially as Wall Street gets more jittery and their 401ks begin to sort of sink again. It's going to be real problematic.
This is the first critical test for Speaker McCarthy. Rick, how do you see it playing out?
I think it's definitely a critical test, and I disagree with using the debt ceiling to negotiate decreased spending, which I would like to see for certain. And the Republicans would argue there aren't many. I think Chip Roy said today there aren't many leverage points, and this is one of them. Remember, raising the debt ceiling is simply raising the money that Congress has already spent. This is not new spending. But there are a lot of things that are not correct about this debate. One is this would not be the first time America has defaulted on its debt. It would actually be the fifth time America has defaulted on its debt. And I believe, in checking with constitutional scholars, that it doesn't matter if the Congress passes the debt limit or not. The Treasury Secretary is obligated by the 14th Amendment, Section 4, to recognize and pay debt. So the Biden administration has a responsibility in this, too. If the Congress does nothing, which would be derelict, the Treasury Secretary still must pay, as a first obligation, debts and interest payments and bonds. She cannot decide not to pay those. That would be unconstitutional.
We're at time, but just
I just think that still has a lot of risk at destabilizing the financial markets.
And we saw that during former President Obama's administration when they got so close to the cliff that actually the country's credit rating was downgraded.
Rick's arguing constitutional law.
Well, it was a fascinating conversation from beginning to end. Thank you all, Mike, Tia, Cornell, and Rick. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.